It's very important in philosophy to make sure that we define our words and our terms, to make sure that the meanings that we intend by them are, in fact, what are being received by those that we are engaged in conversation with. And it so happens that there are several terms and words in philosophy that aren't unique to philosophy, but they're used in philosophy in a very kind of specific way. And we need to make sure and remind ourselves how we're using those within philosophy to avoid those kinds of confusions. Let's begin with the terms metaphysics and epistemology. Now, these happen to be two words that they're used outside of philosophy, but they are pretty specific to philosophy. Metaphysics meaning technically after physics, because Aristotle coined this phrase when he wrote a book on physics, and then he decided to write on the things that go beyond physics, or it comes after physics, so he wrote metaphysics. But we use that term to refer to talking about the nature of reality, how things exist, external to us, meaning external to our thoughts, out there in the physical world. How do things exist? So we might even ask, how does justice exist? Or we may ask something more mundane. How does a bike exist? So if we're talking about how does a bike exist, does it exist as an assemblage of parts? Is that what it really is? Wheels, spokes, brakes, seats, bars, etc.? Or does it actually exist on a atomic level? Is that how the bike really exists? Atomically? Or does it only exist as a bike when assembled as a whole unit? Okay, so this is a metaphysical discussion, really, because we're just discussing how does a bike, for instance, exist. Now, in epistemology, we would be asking, how do we know? Episte, to know. Epistemology, theory of how we know anything, and the process of coming to know things. So I might tell you, you're from the planet Zoron, and you're pointing at a bike saying, what is this? Well, I might give you an explanation, and the alien might say, well, how do you know this? How do you know this is true? How did you get the information and process it so that what you're telling me can be somehow verified? So epistemology is sort of the whole discussion about how we know things and how we can be certain that what we know is true. That's an epistemological discussion. All right, so let's move on. We've got objective and subjective. Now, you use these all the time, but let's just kind of go over it again. Let's remind ourselves that objective means the things that are external to us, the object out there, whereas subjective, sub, under, beneath, internal, those are the things that are going on inside us. Now, let's take, for instance, we're talking about a candy bar. And I ask you, what is your favorite candy bar? Well, you could point to a candy bar external to you and say, this one right here is my favorite candy bar. But if I say to you, what is your favorite flavor? And you say chocolate. Now, that is a subjective opinion. That is within you. We can never say that chocolate is objectively the favorite flavor. It's not for everyone. It's a matter of subjective opinion. It's within you. It's internal. And that's what we mean by subjective matters as opposed to that which is objective or external to us. An important distinction to keep in mind in philosophy, anyway. Well, okay, let's move on. How about perceive and conceive? Perceive, the word perceive, in philosophy is linked to sensation and experience. When you have a perception, you are using your five senses to bring in information into your mind. You're using the sensation created by your sensory organs, your five sensory organs, that give you an experience. You bring them in so that then you can what? Well, you can think about them and have thoughts about them. You can conceive them in a sense. Now, because you can perceive something doesn't necessarily equate to conceive, and vice versa. For instance, if I say, look at the ball hanging from the ceiling in the dance hall. It's got many sides. It's got mirrors. They shine light on it, spins around, puts dots on the wall. And I tell you, this is called a chiliagon. Why? Because a chiliagon is a 1,000-sided object. So, in fact, it may be a chiliagon, but if you look at one of these balls, you're not going to be able to say, yes, that is a chiliagon. I can perceive all 1,000 sides, and therefore I understand it as a chiliagon. You're not going to be able to perceive it. However, you have no problem conceiving. I can tell you that a chiliagon has 1,000 sides, and then I can point to the ball in the ceiling and say, and that has 1,000 sides, therefore it's a chiliagon. And with thought and reason, you can understand that, even though you can't necessarily perceive it. Okay. Now, another couple of words worth looking at are reason and emotion. Now, these are very common words, right? Let's remind ourselves that reason has to do with mental activity. Rationality we equate with the word reason, whereas emotion is linked to the physical and the passions, as it were. The passions meaning the feelings that we get internally as a result of information given to us through our five senses. These are the passions. Emotions happen to you. Reason is an activity that we do more volitionally, by choice. Emotions tend, like I said, to happen to you. So when you feel emotionally, I'm a little edgy because I'm hungry. See, that's something that happens to you. You don't decide, I think I'm going to begin to be hungry. I'm going to do that now. You have to, these emotions happen to you. They well up from within. Whereas mental activity technically can be divorced from emotion and can take place without being linked necessarily to the five senses. They are, of course, linked, and some of the things we think about can make us emotional. Some of the emotional experiences that we have can affect the way we think. But they are two, in philosophy, we want to make sure that we distinguish between the two experiences that we have when we talk about reason and emotion. Great. Let's see. Then there's general and particular. This is just a simple distinction. Remember, general, genus, principles, the general category of something as opposed to the particulars in that category, the specifics, the specific examples of something in the category. So if we're talking about dogs, you've got the general principle, the general category of canine or dog, whereas within that general category, there are particulars. There are poodles and Great Danes and whatnot. Those are specific examples of dog, but they themselves do not contain all of the general principle. So again, general in philosophy, we want to remember, especially the term principle. When we talk about principles, we're talking about general statements or ideas under which many examples might exist. Okay, and then we have the branches of philosophy, rationalism and empiricism, which are defined in another video. But just real quickly, in rationalism, we're thinking about theory. We're thinking about concepts and ideas using reason. And a good little phrase to link with rationalism is simply think about it. When we pause and we begin to reflect upon things, maybe our experiences, we're thinking and we're trying to be rational and use our reason to think about these things. Whereas empiricism, from the word empiri, to see, means that we're using our five senses to bring into us experiences that we then maybe in turn will think about. So a good phrase to link with empiricism is look and see. So if, again, you are from another planet and I'm explaining to you what a bike is, I give you the theory about a bike. You know, it's a little contraption with steering mechanism and wheels and a place to seat and a way to pedal yourself so that you can move about. Okay, great. We've thought about that. We've got the idea, the theory. We rationally understand it. Now, let's experience it. And so now we point to a bike and we say, look, see that? That's what I'm talking about. That's what the theory is. That now you can look at this and have the experience. You can even get on the bike and have the experience of the theory. So that's a quick overview of those two terms that come up a lot in philosophy. And finally, we have contingent and dependent. These are actually related. Contingent meaning dependent. Probably the easiest way to explain these terms is, or at least the term contingent, is to think about how you are contingent upon there having been parents that conceived you. We know this is a fact by your very existence. Your existence proves that at one time there were parents that conceived you.